American exceptionalism has always posited that American leaders can't really be criminals. War criminals are leaders of small, powerless countries in Africa, but they're never American presidents. No matter how much barbarism and savagery and war criminality American presidents order, whether in Iraq, Vietnam, the most you can say about them is, well, I don't agree with all their policies. I think they made mistakes, but they have to be well-intentioned, good people, is crucial to the myth of American exceptionalism. This idea of taking George Bush and Dick Cheney and all of those goons who established worldwide torture chambers and CIA black sites, invaded and destroyed a country of 26 million people based on lies. The idea that they are good people that we ought to embrace as maybe political adversaries but not our enemies, something that has been enduring long before Trump and was inaugurated. When Trump was running for president, he did challenge a lot of the premises that have been kept in the unchallengeable realm, whether or not we should continue to be in NATO. He obviously ran in strong condemnation of the war in Iraq. He opposed the CIA effort at regime change in Syria, things that were horrifying to the intelligence community. And the intelligence community did go to war with him from the beginning. A very disturbing state of affairs for American democracy when you have an unelected body of government, the intelligence community that operates in the dark with no limitations, emerge as the most effective adversary of the elected president. Democrats start cheering for the CIA and the FBI and the intelligence community and the Pentagon, and the neocons, who have long been their biggest cheerleaders, became opponents of Trump on ideological grounds that caused liberals then to align with the very ideological actors that the left for decades has been rightly viewing as the most odious and the most threatening in American political life. And it's ushered in this kind of radical realignment where almost always when Democrats attack Trump, it's usually from the right. He's not willing to be tough and stand up to American adversaries. Militaristic, imperialistic mindset, the defining rhetorical tactic of conservatives against Democrats, has now been adopted by Democrats because Democrats are now led by the CIA, the military, neoconservatives, and Bush Cheney officials.
I actually like Dick Cheney for real. I get on with him. I think he's a decent man. I spoke to this man repeatedly about this job.
If Biden wins, it's going to be an enormous problem for Democrats. There's a whole series of crises evolving and emerging prior to the election of Donald Trump that Biden and the Democrats are uniquely ill-suited to rectify because it was their ideology that helped fuel those crises in the first place. When the economy starts failing, largely because of the coronavirus, tens of millions of people are out of work, small businesses are going bankrupt, people can't pay their rent, foreclosures. The economy, by almost every metric, is about to crumble. The blame naturally goes to Trump. But once Joe Biden is sitting in that chair, those problems are going to start to get blamed on Democrats, and Democrats do not have the ideological wherewithal to address those problems because they continue to be beholden to the billionaire class, the corporate class, the ideologues of endless war. And you already saw in 2016 what kind of a backlash can ensue when people correctly identify neoliberal ideology as the author of their woes. And if we have another 4 years under Joe Biden, where he's starting in a hole already, it could really turn huge numbers of people off to Democrats permanently. And so unless Democrats change their ideology, they're only going to end up exacerbating those problems, and they can't change their ideology because their ideology is what's demanded of them by their donor base. It's always been a suspicion on the left that moderates or centrists or establishment liberals would prefer to lose to the Republicans as long as they could maintain control of the party than they'd rather win if they had to get behind a leftist candidate like Sanders. That question, to the extent anyone harbored doubts about that, was definitively answered in the UK. When Corbyn became the leader of the Labour Party, it was obvious all along that the kind of Blairite establishment, moderate wing of the party was devoting almost all of their energies to destroying and sabotaging him, even if it meant losing the election with him, than they were to attacking the Tories precisely because they'd rather have lost with Corbyn as their leader than have won with Corbyn as their leader, even if it meant Theresa May or Boris Johnson. That's 100% obvious. It was obvious as we watched it. Now there's documentation that demonstrates that that was true. In 2020, Michael Bloomberg was a kind of backstop against a Sanders nomination. He was pretty open about that. Everything that the Democratic establishment has done demonstrates that they will go all out to ensure someone like Bernie Sanders, a socialist, somebody who runs against the Democratic Party establishment, never gets control of the Democratic Party, exactly like the establishment laborites did to Corbyn. I don't see any reason for the left to compromise. One of the lessons of 2020 for the Bernie Sanders campaign was he compromised continuously. He thought that if he made himself more amenable to the standard Democratic voter, but even more so to mainstream Democratic institutions, that he could gain their support. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how power operates. The more he compromised, the more blood they smelled in the water. So, for example, they've been using this tactic against the left in multiple countries. They used it continuously against Corbyn, claiming that online leftist supporters are uniquely vicious and toxic and misogynistic. And it's complete bullshit. If anyone who's ever been a target of establishment centrist Democrats, as I am and as a lot of other people are, know that that faction is as vicious and as toxic and as hateful as any other. But what happens is, because mainstream journalists don't provoke the ire of establishment factions, they believe, because they're so self-absorbed and can only judge the world through the limited, stunted prism of their own experience, this only exists on the left because that's the only place I hear it from. If you're a writer at The Independent or a journalist at The Guardian, you're like, oh, it's only on the left that people are hateful because I don't ever see this from the center. Of course you don't see it from the center. You're a mouthpiece for the center. Why would they attack you? Ask somebody who does critique the center whether they get a lot of online abuse, and they'll say, I get endless amounts that are so hateful and shocking that you can barely describe it. So this theme emerged not just for Corbyn but also Sanders. In America it was called the Bernie Bros. That went on for 4 years. They used it against him in 2016, again in 2020. And instead of saying what I just said, this is a concocted bullshit narrative that the establishment uses to discredit and delegitimize leftist movements, instead of saying that, which is true, he threw his supporters under the bus continuously by giving credence to it.
Anybody who supports me who is engaged in sexist attacks is unacceptable. I don't want that support.
Kept trying to compromise with it, thinking that doing so would diffuse it, but the opposite happened. It strengthened it. Oh, even Bernie says this is a problem for his campaign, and so it got used up until the very end, very, very successfully. The other example is with the anti-Semitism attacks. Every time Corbyn or Labor would try and apologize for it or say we're taking action against it, it would give credence to the idea that there was actually a real substantial problem on the Corbynite left with anti-Semitism, as opposed to a few rogue people, just like there is in every part. There's lots of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism on the right and in the center as well, but no one suggests that that's a pathological crisis for those two factions, and Corbyn gave credence to the idea that it was on the left, and that was a mistake as well. Anytime you have an illegitimate, bad faith attack, if you try and appease it as opposed to destroy it, you're going to end up strengthening it, and that's something that the left absolutely needs to learn. The hope is the emergence of an organized institutional left, recruiting candidates who are challenging the Democratic mainstream from a genuinely left-wing perspective. We support workers, we support universal health care coverage, an end to wars. You increasingly see not just candidates who have long demonstrated a belief in those values running and winning, but I think what you're seeing is something even more interesting now, which is a lot of candidates who don't actually genuinely support those views, pretending that they do, because they realize that that's now a path to winning, which, if you're a movement trying to change politics, you don't really care why a politician advocates your views and supports your views out of genuine conviction or because they perceive it to be in their self-interest. It ends up being the same positive outcome. And the other issue is, I think that neoliberalism is, in a way, an ideology that has a gun to its own head and its finger on the trigger, and it's only a matter of time before it finally puts a bullet in its own head, because an ideology that destroys the lives of so many people eventually will be so discredited that there will be a strong reaction against it. We're already seeing that. The problem is sometimes anger over neoliberalism can be misdirected into support for extreme nationalism, but it's still an opportunity for the left as well to step into that breach with a popular left-wing politics that I think has the chance to be successful. I really encourage you to support on Patreon Double Down News. Independent journalism has never been as important as it is now. Double Down News is devoted to challenging power, to questioning pieties without fear, without constraints, and that's exactly the kind of addition we need more than ever to our discourse, and independent journalism is possible only with your support.